Yeah?
Last question. How would you protect yourself against negative people if you're around negative people?
If you are around negative people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see this as personally, it is according to Buddhist point of view, you really don't have negative people as such. It is interdependently produced by our own way of relating to them. When did the person introduce themselves saying, oh, by the way, I'm negative people? You know? See, so it's just conceived by our own mind over the period of few weeks maybe, or maybe sometimes years, and then we have given them label, they are negative, he's negative. So from Buddhist point of view, there is really no negative people from their own side. The negative could be a kind of a reflection of our own way of relating to them, which is not totally positive, maybe. We didn't mean to be negative to them, but our experience to them, whatever the karmic factors are, has been negative and not so positive. Then that has sort of sedimented or built up over a period of time. Therefore we keep seeing them as something negative. So from Buddhist point of view, when we have this kind of situations, largely it is interdependent. Negative people are karmic factors produced mutually by us and them. But if we tell them, you are a negative person, can you teach me how to deal with you? Of course they will say, no, I'm not negative. I was just thinking about that yourself. so they might say that to us. You see, that's the issue, is most people's argument comes from that. What makes us to think they are negative is we have had some way of relating an experience, whether fact or fiction. Maybe it could be our reasonable relative experience of them, and karmically sometimes we do attract difficult situations, and they are there for a good lesson. So if you're very strong, you can say, I have a karma to deal with this in a very positive way. Otherwise, this is going to drag on like a cart that is pulled by the ox will always follow with him. So I cannot not go somewhere without pulling this cart. So I want to empty this cart. So if you find the cart that you're pulling is very heavy, you got to see how you can lighten that. So, and poor them, they are also driven by their karma. You've got to have compassion to them. They are not even aware they are negative, yet they're so negative to your experience, maybe 3 other people, 4 other people. You're not alone. Everybody says that person is so negative. What can we do with him? But yet the person is karmically situated in a way that they are not aware of that. So we have to really have compassion. If just being around such negative person is like this, what must be like to be them? You've got to think like that. Then you will feel great empathy and compassion to them. And then, but yet they don't know what they have been like to the extent that we know them as a negative. They know not, poor thing. And so because of that, they are completely unaware of their aggression or their whatever their negativities are. They're not aware of them. They suffer from ignorance. So you have to think like that. You should separate the person's negativity from the person. Then you will have a little bit left of the goodness of the person, and you should think of if this negativity is not influencing this person, then what is left of him? There are other good characters in the person as well. Maybe you may recall the person doing some good things. Then you realize there is a positive person in there. If it wasn't the blanket that he's been wearing, that we've been seeing, by the time you remove that stigma, then the person actually have reasonable qualities that are good as well. It might even be to our interest to win them back as positive friend, rather than reject them as a negative people. So its question is how strong we are emotionally and spiritually to think like that. If we are not so threatened and not so judgmental to them, we could definitely disassociate them from their negativities. Because their negativity is probably our action, a conduct of theirs, but not themselves. They're not proud, perhaps, of the thing they did, if they knew that it was that harmful. And only if they were allowed to confess, probably they would. But have they been given that opportunity? We just assume in our mind they are negative, they are selfish or whatever. Maybe they need to be told that what they're doing is negative, or whatever destructive, or whatever the case might be. So in this way, this kind of meditation is very good. You send the blessings of your healing medicine Buddha, and then send them being covered in the light, and send them the healing light, and they sort of recover from their negativities, their unawareness, their negative habits, whatever they are. So then you are trying to slowly change your way of seeing them. And you're dealing with them not by escaping, not by denying, not by renunciation, not by fleeing, not by fighting, but with compassion. Lots of people fight with negative people. Others flee from negative people. But the wise do neither of these two F words. Neither flee nor fight. But they will make friend with this. They'll make friend with this. They'll still make friend with this. This is my friend of karma. You should see them. There's a lot of lesson for me to learn from this. And therefore not run away from them or fight against them. The difference between us and them is a misunderstanding, thin layer of misunderstanding. Otherwise it might even be our sister, it might be our father, it could be our mother, it could be someone very important person. So to lump him or her thinking they are negative is like, throwing the whole thing without seeing what could be retrieved, So lots of people lump someone with their negativities, and they don't realize that might make themselves completely, reject a whole lot of things. They may feel totally alienated. So therefore, one needs to know that maybe their negativity is pardonable if I have enough confidence and compassion. So we need to develop our own stock of merit, I suppose, kindness, I suppose, tolerance, I suppose. If you develop these qualities through practice of meditation, through practice of medicine Buddha, you will have the power to deal with that more kindly and compassionately, without rejecting or fighting or fleeing, but slowly try to smooth and slowly try to have a very soft approach towards them, so that we are not abruptly aggressive or ignoring and running away from that, blaming them. This fighting and fleeing has done so many times by people, only to those who have fled from those things they have fled with it. They didn't know that negativities they thought they were fleeing from, they actually they went with it themselves. The anger they haven't left behind, judgment they haven't left behind, so they escaped, they ran away, but they took with themselves. So they haven't really left anything behind. Those who fought caused mutual distraction, caused a lot of heartache, a lot of confusions. not just between the two, but all his or her circle of concerns and friends. So they have caused more destruction than any benefit whatsoever. So we must meditate on the futility of these two extreme approaches, but find a middle ground and try to make friend with this, and try to make peace with this, and try to understand and pardon oneself, and separate our own. Because if we don't do that, there's not a lot of difference between us and them. We are very negative about them. You see, the only difference is just we seem to think we don't have. Now that's a very dangerous position. It's explosive. So one needs to say, look, I'm about to lose my own sanity by fighting and fleeing this man. I got to soften my approach, and therefore develop compassion. They must be suffering the way they are. They don't even know they're that negative. And then when you try to be in their position, maybe a couple of minutes, then you start to see what must be like to be in that state, unknowing state. Then you really develop lots of then to begin to suffer. You begin to tell their suffering, what the degree of suffering they are, and they are not even aware they're doing it themselves. Now the danger exists for us to copycat that. If we react badly, we can do that ourselves in no time. So how can we now be a rescuer and to sort of, and that's a calm about it. You have to calmly approach a very compassionate response that can sort of remove the dangers, and then slowly try to rescue the person and you from the problem. Problem is not the person and not us. Problem is what we think of each other. And if you can disassociate from that thoughts, so you can actually, that's why you got to breathe out from the right nostril, a rooster goes out, and a snake goes from the right nostril, pig comes from both nostrils a few times, and then you realize you have disassociated from your thoughts. It has just gone out in one good blob. A green blob comes from the Symbolically doing that could be quite healing. So all of a sudden you really felt that you really got rid of. You are associating with bad thoughts. You have no idea that bad thought is just worse than the person out there. And this is ruining your friendship with them, or your future with them, or therefore I'm going to disassociate from this thought. And if so long as I hold the hand of this thought, this is making my life or my time with this person as bad as it is. When you learn to do, then you have apprehended the root cause of suffering. Buddha said, suffering must be understood, so origin must be apprehended. Now you have truly apprehended the origin of suffering is your anger or ignorance, and theirs as well, theirs as well, and their suffering is their ignorance, their anger is there. And so when you do that, then you're not laying blame on this poor negative person of our sufferings. I mean, if we had benefited by thinking like that, we would have done it all the time. But we are suffering as a result of that. So we need to find an alternative, a middle path, not an extreme rightist or leftist, but a middle path that doesn't do mutual distraction, that doesn't leave the problem unaddressed, but actually comes and understand the problem and apprehend the root cause of suffering. That searching and pausing, most people don't do. But one who has calmness, meditation, refuge in peace, and then give enough time, pray, light candles, offer lamps, and that things will clarify in time. Have faith that these will. And then you practice meditation and do this. Because your heart yearns this, and then you find, in the end, you have won a good friend. You nearly lost him, but you have discovered your friend back. And then what was really negative about was the misunderstanding, the confusion, the anger that jeopardized the friendship that we used to have. So that's a common enemy. That's not just our enemy that is identical to them, but it's their enemy as well. Only difference is we apprehend it first, for them as well as for us. Now we should be given a medal for that. Because you don't tell them, look, I apprehended your problem. You don't tell them that. You just say, look, I apprehended his problem as well. You can talk to yourself softly. Look, I thought I was apprehending my own cause of problem, but I apprehended his as well. But I wouldn't tell him just yet because he's not yet fit to hear this. So some mothers or some sisters or some brothers, some kind people, just accept as if it's theirs, and never mention about the other person. Just don't mention about that because they just can't cope with it. You can tell. You just slowly try to cope for both in the meantime, and then pray. It's very good. It is very compassionate. It's a very, very, very discreet and very effective. You can see yourself as really rescued. You're no longer a kind of easy victim of the other person's negativity. You have sort of stepped aside from being an easy basket in which everything falls. Previously, you're wallowed in this self-pity that everything falls onto us. Even now we have went out of their way. We are now not going to be everything won't be falling onto us. And when you've done that, then negativity is just an illusion, that we didn't know. It didn't exist from its own side. It was just a misunderstanding. It's just a pity that most people's argument between two people, their conflict, are caused by nothing major. It's just this small misunderstanding, confusion gets exacerbated, and people just drum it up and whip it up, and it looks very big. But if you really look carefully, what are they talking about? And not a lot. So when your wisdom shines or brightens your mind, then the negativity is dark forces. Your understanding is light. And where does the darkness stay when there's light? It cannot coexist. Darkness doesn't coexist with light. Darkness is only darkness because there's no light. So when you turn to light, which is not to see the negativity of other persons specifically, but a kind of a common negativity that has been sort of whipped for a long time, then you're turning to light. And as you turn to light, then the function of light is to dispel darkness, to turn the darkness into light. That is what we call awakening. We awaken from the slumber or unawareness, mostly sleep of unawareness. We have to wake up. So the dream-like suffering or problem that we had was because we have fallen asleep. Only when you're asleep you may have dreams. But for sake of not having dreams like this, we wake up. We don't stay in sleep. So that act of waking up, amazing thing about that is during the Buddha's time there was one person who killed 999 people, and everybody called him Angulimala and the negative, the terror, and nobody disagrees as far as thinking he's a negative person. Nobody argued. Everybody was to get him because he's so negative. Because the whole world was after him. Because he was really destructive. He killed his uncle, her brother, their neighbors. Basically he was killing everyone and picking their fingers as garland, and then try to prove he's some kind of practice of some sort. But when the Buddha saw him, he didn't see. They had a few exchange between the Buddha and him, and Buddha told him, stop! Actually, Buddha didn't tell him stop first. The guy told Buddha to stop because he thought Buddha was running away from him, murdering him. That was the negative Angulimala's perception. He thought everybody is running away from him, including Buddha. He said, stop. Buddha said, you stop. I stopped a long time ago. And then the murderer thought, that was really worth listening. He said, he's walking from me, but yet he says, you stop, I stopped a long time ago. Then he asked, what do you mean by to stop? And then the Buddha said, I stopped causing suffering a long time ago. I asked you to stop suffering. Look at you, holding this bloody sword in your hand and wearing fingers, garlands of people you have murdered, and yet you are not realizing what you should do. And then the Buddha explained to him what a terrible conduct that he's getting involved, and then he totally confessed the Buddha, and in front of the Buddha, he was not a negative person. He was a totally misguided person, and Buddha saw his Buddha potential and pardoned him and gave him the opportunity to change himself. And then instantly he became Buddha's disciple and then he became a saint, He was ordained as a monk and sitting next to the Buddha, and then with other monks sitting like that. And there comes the king and all his troops who've been hunting for this terrible negative person. They sort of heard that the Angulimala was in that vicinity, and when they came close to the Buddha, they never believed that it would be next to the Buddha. And when he was sitting next to the Buddha, they couldn't believe that this person is that person. He's changed, completely changed into a man who has completely violent and aggressive, now completely confessed himself and turned to peace. And they still wanted to punish him because he's still negative. Buddha would see him as a disciple, as a saint, but the people still saw him as a murderer. And he was a murderer. And so the people had to be consoled and clarified by the Buddha as what he has become. He has changed. You don't know he has changed. So sometimes we think too many times, oh, he's the same person, he's the negative person, he's the aggressive one, he's the violent one, he's a serial killer. We keep thinking, that was maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even maybe say 5 months ago. But since then, did he do the same thing? It's our mind that keeps thinking that he's this, he's this. That makes we didn't allow him to change. When he was allowed to change by Buddha only 3 days ago, in front of the eyes of the wise being who is awakened, he no longer harbors ill will to this person, because Buddha himself has this very heightened, I would say, perspective with which he looked with wisdom and kindness, and therefore didn't reject the person with his misdeeds. He actually was able to win the person back who confessed himself, who acknowledged his misdeeds. When he realized when people acknowledge their misdeeds, they know they are not the deeds. People are not their deeds. They may be associated with the deeds. And so if we can disassociate from that, the person from the misdeeds, then there is a breathing space, so to speak, that we can distinguish the person from the misdeeds, the negativeness of the person. And amazing thing about the negativeness of the negative thing is that it has been compacted by our mind, aversely thinking about it one too many times, and therefore even slightest mistake a person did, we could make it that bad, because to some people when you tell the story they say, what are you talking about? They think it's nothing. But to the person who thinks it's terrible, to them it is the whole thing, but nothing. There's nothing worse than that. So they could only they can magnify it as large as they wanted to. But those who have a little bit clarity and compassion and wisdom, it's amazing thing about the clarity and compassion is we are not trying to prove they are not negative. We are trying to prove there is no benefit in thinking they are negative. We have to do something what to do with the negative. That's why Shanti Deva says, if you can't do something about it, then why you talk about it all the time? If you can do something about it, just do it without talking about it. So if the person is negative, just do something that makes change to reduce his or her negativity associated with our way of relating to them. By giving them, by forgiving them, by practicing generosity or kindness. And this is exactly what we are doing this healing meditation for. It's not just for illness as a physical illness, as I started yesterday talking. It's not just a physical illness for which medicine Buddha practice. It's for the psychological, emotional, intellectual imperception of people and how they suffer from that. How they suffer from their own cataract of this and then have this. When they begin to practice this way, there's an amazing sense of fitness in us. All of us, and previously we were just seized by this situation. Now we become liberated because it has given us an solution as how we may relate to it more wisely, more effectively than we might have before. And yes, we flee quite a few times, we fought a few times, and there was no good benefit. So we are looking for an alternative. That seeking, that act of seeking is the seeker who's seeking the way of the Buddha. And then you find the way of the Buddha. That is, hard though it may be to pardon, hard though maybe it to develop the wisdom, but that is the way. When you found the way, then it's all laid out before us, and to practice the only thing that is noble. And if we are not fit to yet to practice, we need help. We need refuge. That's why refuge is very important. We take refuge in the Buddha. We take refuge in the Dharma. Because we don't have enough awakening. We don't have enough wisdom and compassion. Therefore we take refuge in the Dharma. We want to increase our wisdom and compassion. We want to increase our awareness. And that's why we take refuge in the Sangha. And so it's very good to have this humility. Sense of hopelessness is very important when you truly seek refuge. Refuge means you're exposed to so many dangers of being too close to someone who's negative, whose influence on us is no good. We are not behaving or able to perform very well because of them being so close in our mind or whatever. So we definitely feel a little bit inappropriately located. We want us to be in a space that is different from this. It is that, a relocation of ourselves is called going for refuge. Because we want to go from this place, it's untenable. So we're going for refuge. We must depart from this space that we don't like, where we feel cornered, where we feel attacked, where we will feel too exposed to this negative situation. And therefore we go for refuge. We go for refuge means we must leave those thoughts, leave those and go somewhere where it is a new location. And that is the refuge, where you are safe, sound, warm, protected and guarded, because you will practice Dharma, because you follow the way of the Buddha. And so doing, your healing practice is knowing the further danger that exists in your injury. How can you make sure that your injury is not worsened and prevent the likelihood of injuring again? And like that, you couldn't go and fight again when you're already injured and limping. They already got on your shoulder. So you can't go. It's very dangerous. They may hit on the next shoulder. They may hit on the head. So we have to, therefore, run and leave that place, which is so vulnerable place to be. Go somewhere. Think something that is different. Therefore, going for refuge. Active verb. You must leave. You must leave the attitude. You must leave the conviction. You must leave the perception. That's what it means. That's what it means when we say going for refuge. And it is not retreating, it is not escaping, it's actually going from a worse and bad place to a better and safer place. Hence it's called refuge. And it's amazing thing about meditation is when you understand the teachings and the meditations and how to deal with anger or how to deal with the fear, like this kind of negative situation, it is those things then you bring to the safer places. People have lots of difficulties, but it's those difficulties brought them to Dharma. And so, they wish they didn't have to go through the difficulties, but many people go through difficulties, but they don't find Dharma. They find certain spiritual or other philosophical schools that are completely, unresolved. It's got no philosophical base, no logical rationale there. It's got no tested thing. It's totally based on blind faith. So how fortunate are we, or those who are actually able to seek and find the way that actually brings to a safer place called refuge. So it is thus, because we were talking about taking refuge out of fear. We are afraid of our exposure to difficult circumstances or negative people or difficult work environment or whatever the case might be. As we begin to gain the greater understanding of the Dharma, then we truly understand this refuge is practical thing. This is not just a spiritual refuge. These are intellectual refuge. This is an emotional refuge. When you have such conviction in the path of the way of the Buddha, then you never felt that kind of emotional competence or security then after finding the refuge. So in this way, one needs to deepen one's faith, such as in a medicine Buddha practice, and you find yourself reciting the mantra. This is where if you do the sadhana mantra, you have dissolved yourself in emptiness, so you have taken the role of medicine Buddha instead. So therefore, medicine Buddha practice assists us as well as assists the people, mutually covered. With this in mind, there is not a thing that we try to cover ourselves and leave them exposed into danger. It's not like that. We actually dedicate the effort. Every single effort we make for them as much as for ourselves. If we are willing to suffer with them, we wish to share the benefit of not having suffering. and that is called the refuge. It's not just a preliminary thing, but it's always a question of the safety of our thoughts, safety of our speech and mind, and our way of being.